Hi, everybody. This is Venkat from Simply Coach, and you're listening to the Growth Dialogues podcast, the show that brings together experts in coaching, therapy, and consulting from around the world. Hello, and welcome to the episode of Growth Dialogues. Our guest today is Kevin Parker. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Venkat. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. So, Kevin is a very experienced coach, and a couple of things. He started life as a corporate executive, transitioned as an executive coach, and currently, the topic of what we're going to talk about, he has integrated mindfulness in coaching. I think that many coaches are talking about. I know a lot of my clients speak about it. So we would love to get Kevin's perspective on that. If you go to Kevin's website, mindtrainingmatters.com, one of the first questions he asks you, it sort of makes you reflect, is: are you a leader or a manager in an organization trying to motivate your team while staying motivated yourself? So it's a fairly deep question on which I reflected, because a lot of my clients, when they come, they want to do something for the organization and then they want to do something for themselves. These are not independent of each other, they're very related. So thanks, Kevin, for joining us. If you got a bit of background, Kevin, about your transition from the corporate world to a leadership coach, how did that happen for you?
It's a good question, Venkat. And it was rather a long journey. I started out in corporate sales. I actually then transitioned to ministry work for several years, which held great meaning for me. And then I began another transition towards some HR work.
Hmm.
Was introduced to coaching, leadership coaching as a possible option, and I began to explore certifications. And then I had a unique opportunity to be in a small startup organization, and I played a key role in helping to scale and build that company out. And at the end of that chapter of my career, I just found myself still being felt to do coaching work and
Hmm.
perhaps do coaching on a full time basis. And so I began to then look at some options to return to coaching and then made the decision in July of 2021 to do that.
Okay. And from leadership coaching to transitioning to mindful coaching. So give us some perspective what how you define mindful coaching as for our viewers.
So for me, I made a transition to explore mindfulness meditation back in 2009.
Hmm.
Through my ministry work, I had pretty extensive training in contemplative prayer, but I was looking for something a little different from that. And so I explored mindfulness meditation, discovered John Kabat-Zinn, who was the pioneer in the mindfulness meditation space here in the US. And from there, I began to look at the research, the evidence that shows the benefits like being able to cultivate calmness, focus, build resilience, enhance creativity. And from there, I just began to practice myself, and I became
Hmm.
more and more intrigued with the science and the data that supported the benefits of mindfulness and
Hmm.
began to experience those benefits myself. And so when I began to contemplate a return to executive leadership coaching work, I found myself wanting to integrate mindfulness as a tool within that
Hmm.
work. And I think, Venkat, we both know, right, that at the heart of any good leader is the ability to have self mastery. And
Correct.
what I have found is that mindfulness has become just a great tool for me personally and professionally to grow in my craft, to hone my craft, to become more skillful. And I've seen that now with executives that I work with as they begin to use mindfulness as a tool.
Yeah, and also personally, I realize that the demeanor that a coach brings to a conversation with a coachee with this approach is very different. It's almost like, I would say it's almost a calming influence, if I can say that, right? And very in the moment and very present. I think it's not a very robotic approach by a coach. It's somebody who's very much. I mean, when I interact with you, I sense that you're 100% here. You're very aware of what's happening, and I guess that high extends to your clients as well when you do that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, Venkat. And it's part of how I use mindfulness for myself as a tool to continue to enhance my self awareness, my ability to be fully present in each moment, especially when I'm working with, serving the clients that I'm partnered with. And I do think they feel that sense of presence. They clearly have a sense that I'm listening very intently, and I'm
Mhm.
able to often, sometimes within my first like coaching meetings, clients will share so much information about where they're at, where they're trying to go, and they'll say, "Wow, I'm sorry, I think I shared too much information. That might have been too much for you." And I say, "No, it's okay. It's good. I was able to listen, and now let me share back what I heard that I think is relevant to where you're trying to go through this partnership." And that has become a skill that I really appreciate, that I can kind of synthesize quite a bit of what I hear. And I think it's because of what you mentioned, that I'm just very present. I try to be very present in the moment, and use that as a way to listen intently and best serve my clients.
So when you work with some of these leaders, and I'm just trying to contrast it to what you would have done a few years ago to now, what has changed from a client perspective? What would they see differently in a Kevin of today versus a Kevin of years ago?
It's a great question. I think when I began in 2021 coaching, I was like many coaches who start out in their practice, there was probably some nervousness, right? If I'm honest. And
Mhm,
I would say that while I believe and I have testimonials that show that I serve those clients well, I was always trying to find a way to refine my approach and better leverage and use, say, the core competencies from the International Coach Federation. And so
mhm,
while my clients may not have seen that from me, right, and noticed that maybe I wanted to refine this or that in my skillfulness, I have intentionally continued to try to become more skillful as a coach, to ask better questions, to be able to hold a space where clients feel safe, to share challenging situations, frustrating moments. And from that, I think that's where the difference is. It's just that I've been able to enhance the skillfulness, some of the core areas of skillfulness. That's really important for any coach to have.
mm. And from a client's sort of their emotional intelligence perspective, does that change? Does that improve as they go through these sessions with you? How does that work?
Oh, Venkat, that is a great question. One that often excites me when we start connecting mindfulness to emotional intelligence, right?
Mhm.
And
Mm.
so I've been able to witness that in many, if not all, the engagements that I've been working with clients that have been curious about and have begun to explore mindfulness as a tool for themselves. Because, as you may know, within the emotional intelligence framework, two of the key domains within that really allow for self mastery, for growth, for skillfulness are self awareness and self regulation. Mindfulness, for me and for the clients I've been serving, is one of the premier tools, one of the best methods, techniques that we can leverage in order to expand our self awareness. And as we
Mhm.
expand our self awareness, there's that unique opportunity then to start better self regulating our emotions.
Mhm.
And so, as I've worked with clients, I really see mindfulness as a bridge to building out their emotional intelligence.
You talked about self awareness to self regulation. So I can see clearly that the emphasis is on getting the client to be a better version of themselves, right? So you're playing a catalyst role there to do that. So, since it's an area which is sort of evolving, uh, people may come with some misconceptions about what mindfulness are. I mean, what are some of the general misconceptions that clients have that other coaches listening to you today can address with their clients?
Yeah, I think some of the misconceptions have been that that mindfulness meditation is a, while it is rooted in the Buddhist tradition, many coaches, including myself and other practitioners, teach a secular version. So some folks may believe that it's religiously based. Well, it has roots there. Anytime it's taught in organizations, generally speaking, to my knowledge, it's taught in a secular format. And for some folks,
Mhm.
initially, they might be a little thrown off by that or confused by that. And so I often mention that right in the beginning that as we explore mindfulness, this is a secular version that has Buddhist roots so that they're clear on that. Um, Another misconception is that I think people believe that, like any good routine or any good habit, that it has to happen the same time, the same place each day. And while that can be vitally helpful to building out healthy habits, what I've learned
Mhm.
over the years is that, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well as other coaches, that life is a little more disruptive than that. We don't always have that consistency of frequency or routines. And so bringing a sense of flexibility into our mindfulness meditation practice and approach allows for us to continue to work towards experiencing the benefits, building out the commitment and discipline towards it, but at the same time, not being tripped up by missing on a certain day or time and then feeling like, wow, I can't do this, or I'm not going to be able to be consistent with this. So being just creative and flexible and finding ways to integrate it into our lives has been most helpful with the clients I work with.
I think it's a great way. I think I like the secular aspect of that. Otherwise, this can go into a complete tangent and derail the basic coaching conversation with the client. But
Hmm.
when you introduce this, and I like the way you introduce this to clients, still some of them may have a certain resistance or a mental block because they may have worked with coaches who sort of come, let's say, okay, time starts now, let's talk, and now time ends, end of conversation, let's meet again next month, which is what a lot of the coaches have done over time. Some continue to do that sort of time based coaching. So when a client who has perhaps not experienced your style of coaching, and they come with some preconceived notion or mental blocks, how do you sort of get through that first time and get them to believe in this process?
It's a really good question. And I think for myself and the work that I've been doing, what I've noticed over the years, and it goes back to something I learned many years back in my own studies, is that, the teacher is within, right, Venkat? Like each person has to come to coaching, whether it's leadership coaching, executive coaching, learning and integrating mindfulness or emotional intelligence, but they really have to open themselves up to the process, right? And so for me, what I have tried to do over the years is also weave in the concept of having a growth mindset. And so as we begin engagements, begin to learn about a given client's goals, also start to try to frame that in the sense of a growth mindset and the opportunity to continue to expand our capacities, expand our skillfulness, to improve results as leader, as a top performer. And by just planting that seed and beginning to open their minds to this understanding that sure, there can be more potential and there's more growth possible, I have found that helpful as an initial pivot towards, or helping clients to pivot towards, the process. And within that, if we explore mindfulness or when we explore mindfulness, I have found that just keeping it very simple, not overwhelming them with too much information, and trying to get them really into the experience of mindfulness meditation so they begin to feel the benefits, and then add resources as we go to help build out some learning.
I think this sort of works well with a corporate executive as well because from an abstract you talked of the growth mindset and the goals. So perhaps I think for the executives who are getting coached, this gets very real because they're used to thinking in terms of goals, progress, achievements, etc. So
Hmm.
to relate to that. So when you work with clients, how do you sort of keep them on track in terms of getting them the goal and see how they are progressing from a session to another, from a month to a month. How does that work for you?
Yeah. So within, as you would know, right, the Simply Coach platform, there's some great tools. And the two that I find most helpful when I'm working with clients to help them see the progress, see the growth, see the steps they're taking forward. One is the initial setting up the goals so that they can visually see them. We can begin to track them through the graph and questions that can be asked related to the goals, how they feel in terms of progress. And then the other that I find extremely helpful is the action steps. That tab and that function within the Simply Code platform. It allows a client, myself, to come to coaching agreements after each session around steps that are going to be taken. And within those steps, there may be some resources sent that they have to read. There may be specific action steps related to those resources that they have to start testing out. But by having those action steps clearly defined from each session, we then can track them because when we connect the next time for a meeting, we look right at the action steps and walk through the agreed upon steps that myself and the client established. And so I have found those two functions within the Simply Coach platform extremely helpful to help clients stay focused, on track, and feel like they're making progress towards their goals.
I love the way you phrased that, Kevin. I think from a 30,000 feet concept, you directly could zoom it at ground level and get to the nuts of what they need to do.
Mhm.
So, a couple of things for a lot of our coaches who are listening in, that they say, yeah, this is great, Kevin. I'm convinced of this, but I'm still a bit hesitant whether I can make a coaching practice out of this. Is there, so to say, money in this? Can I jump into it? So what would be your inputs, advice to a coach who's a coach but looking to have mindfulness as a part of their coaching offer? What would be your top two or three ideas that you could share with them?
So that's a good question. And what I'll say is this, Venkat, what informed me when I made this decision to integrate mindfulness and emotional intelligence was that around 2010, 2012, a lot of the good research and data started coming out on the benefits of mindfulness as a tool for focus, stress management, resilience. And from there, many global organizations such as Google, SAP, and others began to integrate it within their working cultures
Mhm.
as a tool for their employees. And so the research continues to show the benefits of mindfulness or even emotional intelligence. And so for me, I would simply encourage any coach to explore mindfulness as a tool for themselves and experience the benefits first and foremost, right? Personally, do a little bit of research around mindfulness as a tool. And from there, I think they'll be able to connect the dots in terms of how it could create value for their own clients that they serve. And doesn't, again, within the work that I do with clients, mindfulness, I have a mindfulness program, a learning program that I use, but I'm not necessarily, I don't think it has to be that involved in the beginnings. It could just be a simple tool where someone learns mindfulness, understands how to teach it properly, and then begins just to weave it in as an option. And from there, perhaps if they feel called to that, drawn to that, I think they then could pursue appropriate credentialing, teaching mindfulness, and then begin to integrate it more and more into their own coaching practice.
I like that. I mean, I think fun is to take incremental steps. Second, use it for myself before I sort of preach to my clients.
Yeah.
Any practice that you think a coach can start using immediately? Any simple mindfulness practice that you can let our coaches know what they could start using now,
Yeah,
Kevin?
it's a great question. So I was trained through the teachings of John Kabat-Zinn, and within those teachings, we're really just training our minds, Venkat, to learn how to be with the breath or the body, and through that, we can then enhance our focus. We can strengthen our self-aware, expand our self-awareness, strengthen self-regulation. And so, what I would suggest for any coach that's curious about mindfulness, whether you subscribe to the Headspace app or Calm or even say Insight Timer, or I'm a teacher there, um, is just to create a consistent practice. Start maybe 3 days a week and begin to practice 5, 6 minutes a day. And from there, just start to feel the benefits or see if you can notice the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And as you continue to practice and experience benefits, perhaps then take that from 3 days to 4 days, 4 days to 5 days. It really is most helpful, I have found, is just to take it slowly and to integrate and build it out in a way that feels right for each person and not putting any grand expectations on it, but allowing it to organically evolve in a way that you actually feel and notice the benefits first and foremost. And then from there, keep making decisions about, well, maybe I'll practice a little more. Maybe I should explore a retreat, determining what's best as you go. So I think just slow and steady, as we know, often wins the race. And I think that would even apply here in mindfulness space.
Excellent, Kevin. I think that's a great conversation and a great input for our coaches to be starting this. I think it's important to take that first step. Slow and steady absolutely wins the race. And thank you, Kevin, again for joining us, being very generous with your time and sharing your experience. And I think a lot of our coaches who are listening in would see great value from this conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome, Venkat. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Growth Dialogues. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you enjoy your podcast.